All right, so now we're going to get to one of my favorite reoccurring segments, weapons of mass distraction. This is when Donald Trump goes so far out of his way to tweet out things that are so hellishly outlandish, even compared to the, usual run-of-the-mill daily trash that he tweets out. When he drops out epic bombshells that have nothing to do with anything, that's Trump deploying his weapon of mass distraction, or what we in the business would call bamboozle them with bullshit. It's a common, well known technique. He normally saves it for Fridays, for when they do the bad news dump at 7 p.m. But exceptionally bad news came out today, so of course, Trump immediately on the Twitter at like 7 o'clock in the morning, I think we should push back the election, just to watch like liberals freak out and lose their shit and just tweet out 80 bazillion times about, Donald Trump being a fascist and saying that he's going to stay in office, which, let's be honest, he is a fascist, and if he could, he probably would stay in office. But he put that out solely to distract you from more news that would drop his already horribly low poll numbers. Anybody want to know what it is? That's right. The economy shrunk by 33% in the second quarter of 2020. This came out about an hour after Trump's tweet that said everybody freaking out. Let's take a look at just how bad this is. I mean, after all, Trump's going out of his way to distract you from it, so I figure we should take a look at it. All right, so what do we got? Another 1.43 million people filed for state unemployment last week, an increase of 12,000, Labor Department reported Thursday. Second week in a row of increased unemployment filings, and shows that the economic picture continues to remain grim. Let's see, wages and salaries fell sharply in April, but that was more offset by the $1,200 relief payments that the government sent to most adults and the supplemental unemployment benefits of $600 per week. Supposedly, there's going to be another $1,200 check coming, the second one in 5 months, supposedly. Unemployment, I don't know. Democrats and Republicans both seem to agree that the $600 a week is going to fall a certain amount if they do re-sign it. I believe the Democrats were pushing a little more than the Republicans were. But either way, if the federal unemployment benefits do get extended, they will not be for $600 a week. They're definitely going to reduce that amount. The government payments helped prevent an even steeper drop in consumer spending, which is the lifeblood of U.S. economy, and allowed struggling families to buy groceries and pay rent. Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell said Wednesday the money had been, quote, well spent. It's kept people in their homes. It has kept businesses in business. So that is all a good thing. Now, until we get the virus under control, we're going to need more help. Our view is that we're not going to get to pre-pandemic levels of economic activity until sometime in 2022. That would be a reasonable assumption, assuming it takes the remainder of the year to finish testing, get close to a vaccine, get final approval, then manufacture, however many millions of doses. Then there has to be a distribution plan. There has to be coordination with insurance companies to decide how much of the costs they're going to offset, if they are at all. And then you have to get people to actually go out and get vaccines, which, considering that 30% of the American public thinks that wearing a mask causes you to poison yourself with your own breath and die, good luck on that one. So let's see about all the other lead economic indicators. Let's see what's going on. U6 unemployment rate, which had peaked at 22.5%, is down to 18.3, which again, still higher than during the depths of the recession. 14 million children are going hungry due to the COVID crisis. This is no surprise. It is always children, the elderly, the poor, and black and brown people who, take the brunt of economic disaster. People at the fringes of society and people who live the closest to the margins are always the first ones to, quote, fall through the cracks. So this is horrifying, and yet I'm almost numb to it because I'm used to seeing headlines and numbers like this now, which, God, that's a fucking travesty in and of itself. Nearly 14 million children in the United States went hungry in June. It's an increase of more than 10 million since 2018, and nearly 3 times the number of children who went hungry during the Great Recession, according to an analysis of census data released by Hamilton Project on Thursday. The food crisis shows no signs of abating either. As COVID cases continue to rise, the relief measures implemented by the federal government in March are set to run out, and it's not clear whether children will go back to school, which is where many children get fed. For those of you who aren't aware, there are literally millions of kids who, during the school year, there's something like, I don't know, 20% or a quarter maybe of all kids, the 2 meals a day they eat at school is either the only meals they eat or more than they eat during the non-school year. Because we're a nation of poor people being led by a handful of wealthy people. It's pretty bad, and it's not getting better. Typically, children are fed even in families that are really struggling. Parents will go hungry in order to make sure kids are eating. If you're not able to feed your children, it's a pretty severe signal about your household's capacity to deal with financial shocks. A stunning 16.9% of households said they were struggling to feed their children. The numbers are even worse for black families, 30% of which are struggling to afford food. The rate for Hispanic households is 25%. The struggle to feed children is yet another way the coronavirus crisis is hitting people of color disproportionately harder. There you go, households with children in which children are food insecure by race and ethnicity. See, white down here, 10%, black almost at 30%, Hispanic at almost 25%. Just saying. Don't get mad. I'm not playing identity race politics. I'm fucking reading the stats off the article. Let's see what else is going on. So here's a list of all of the emergency measures that are barely keeping the economy afloat now. Here's a list of all the ones that are about to expire. August 8th, the Small Business Association PPP loans run out. August 31st, foreclosure moratorium expires. CARES Act passed in March protected federally or government-sponsored enterprise mortgages from foreclosure through the end of August. That would be if you have a mortgage that's being routed through like Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac, or let's say like first-time home buyers assistance through HUD, anything like that. Those people had a foreclosure moratorium through the end of August, but that is about to end. That plan also established that homeowners can apply for forbearance on mortgages, including suspended or reduced payments if they experience difficulty paying due to coronavirus. Once the moratorium expires, lenders will be able to take back the property if the homeowners fail to make mortgage payments. In April, past due mortgages spiked to the highest level in 21 years. September 30th, student loan deferral ends. And that's covering roughly 44 million Americans and more than $1.6 trillion of student loan debt. And that's all going to start power cycling again September 30th. In addition, interest rates, which were set to 0% during the pandemic while payments on loans were deferred, may start again, growing the debt pile. Also on September 30th, expiration of payroll support for airline workers. And the second that goes away, the first thing the airlines are going to do is fire more employees. I guarantee you the CEOs will still be getting $10 million, $20 million, $30 million bonuses, though. Don't worry about that. Don't worry. The well-fed always stay well-fed. So the other end of the housing crisis is for those who rent. Somewhere between 23 and 30 million Americans who rent are looking at eviction in the next 60 days. Coronavirus pandemic could result in about 28 million Americans being evicted. By comparison, 10 million people lost their homes in the Great Recession. That's 28 million Americans being evicted, and that's just renters. That's solely people who can't even afford to buy a house, who are clinging on by their fucking fingernails. Yeah, almost a third, somewhere between a quarter to a third of all Americans are renting, and about 28 million of them are going to lose their home. They're like right on the edge now. Let's see. Remember that thing about mortgages? Yeah. 32% of U.S. households missed their July housing payments. Now, keep in mind, all of this is happening while, as what we covered in the beginning, the GDP dropped 32% this quarter. So now keep in mind that that's the backdrop for all these other stats. So not only did the GDP shrink at 32.9%, i.e. one third, not only is unemployment at 18.3%, not only are 14 million kids going hungry, not only are all of these deferral plans about to expire, no, now we're looking at 28 million Americans getting evicted from their rentals, with another 32% of U.S. households missing their July housing payments. You know what happens when you can't pay your mortgage? The bank comes and takes your house. And then a wealthy investor comes and snatches it up. And if you don't believe me, let me show you a real sobering statistic. Pending home sales surged for the second consecutive month as realtors raised their forecast for 2020. Pending home sales continued to climb in June, rising 17% monthly since May and another 6% since June. For now, existing home sales are expected to only decline by 3% for the year. New home sales are projected to rise by 3%. Let's see. It's quite surprising and remarkable that in the midst of a global pandemic, contract activity for home purchases is higher compared to 1 year ago. Consumers are taking advantage of record low mortgage rates resulting from the Federal Reserve's maximum liquidity monetary policy. You know, when banks pump $1 trillion a day, get the Fed to pump $1 trillion a day into them so that they can, quote, loan money. But of course, they only loan money for mortgages to people who now, considering economic insecurity, between 20 to 25% of the total price of a house you now have to have for a down payment to get a mortgage. So if your average home price is $300,000, you have to drop between 60 to 70 grand in cash just to get the mortgage so that you can make payments to the bank for the next 30 years. Yet all the prices keep going up. Sales had spiked in May a stunning 44% compared with April. Let's see. One of the biggest issues remains the supply of existing homes for sale, which fell 18% annually. Last June, 350,000 more homes were on the market. Supply was just up 1% monthly from May to June. GDP is down by a third. Unemployment is almost 19%. 14 million kids are going to bed hungry. All the relief programs are about to end. 28 million Americans are about to become evicted from their rentals. 35% of all people who own homes miss their last mortgage payment with no end in sight. And yet home sales are going up. Do you know why? Because again, the small portal of people who have the kind of liquidity and capital to invest in real estate are snatching up homes left and right because the financing makes it ridiculously cheap for them, and they're going to flip them into rentals. And what will happen is tens of millions of people will not be able to pay their mortgage, will lose their home. Investors will come in, purchase those homes, flip them into rentals, and all those people who were just paying mortgages to finish buying the house that they were in are now going to be paying rent, which means they're going to lose the same amount of money every month, only they're not going to be able to build up any capital. Meanwhile, the wealthy capitalist class will continue to expand their holdings. Now, if all this seems a little crazy, let me give you one last stat to tie it together. Again, 32.9% drop, which is April, May, and June, second quarter, okay? In that same time period, let's find April 1st. April 1st, the stock market was at 20,900, okay? Below 21,000 was the Dow Jones Industrial Average. The Dow Jones is now at 26,000. In the midst of all of that economic turmoil, tens of millions of people losing their jobs, losing their homes, losing their ability to buy food for their kids, and yet the Dow Jones Industrial Average went from below 21,000 to above 26,000. In the same time, the GDP fell by a third. Would anybody care to guess why? Because we have been pumping trillions of dollars of subsidies into banks, into industries, into large corporations, In the standard trickle-down theory that Ronald Reagan made famous 40 years ago, and for those of us who remember Ronald Reagan, we are still waiting for the trickle-down to hit us. It hasn't come yet. We're going on 40 years. It should be here any minute now, though, I'm sure. What you're looking at here, plain and simple, is wealth extraction. It is the wealthy capitalist class extracting wealth, both from people, from the working class, and through their connections with the government, directly sucking the wealth out of the nation. Our tax dollars, our equity, our resources. It is all going away. Okay? So remember, while that continues to drop and that continues to go up, everybody else pays the price.